100,000 greetings from the wet coast of North America, Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, and the Vancouver B-Sides is going to be held in about a month and a half. I am delighted to be back in Dublin because I taught CISSP review seminar there about 17 years ago. Interesting experience. And all of you can take a picture of my screen and get all my details from that QR code in complete safety, bearing in mind that I did get my start in security as a malware researcher, and so I know every way there is to trick people into installing malware on their computers. However, we'll not mention that. And yes, we're going to be talking about homomorphic encryption here. As soon as we get this thing to work, yes. This also is details which you can clearly read if you understand ROT 13, since we're talking about encryption, homomorphic encryption. Though homomorphic encryption, the basic idea is you can encrypt the data, and while it is still encrypted, without decrypting it, still be able to use it for something. You can do something with it. You do not have to decrypt it in order to perform some kind of function to be able to get any information. Oh yes, Canada. Somebody mentioned Canada on the chat. I should say that this is the beginning of Canadian content time, seeing as how immediately after me there's Chet, and then Dave is going to be finishing up with a keynote. So you're stuck with us for a while. Just give me a second though, and I'll fire you guys some details of links and stuff on the talk. Anyway, so on with homomorphic encryption. While I was setting up the slides for this presentation, I saw this interesting news item that Canada's CSE, which is our version of the spies and communications people who spy on us and everybody else around the world and so on and so forth. They said that they were working on what they call the holy grail of encryption. And this is, of course, homomorphic encryption. So you can encrypt something, you can maintain the encryption, you don't have to decrypt it, and you can still perform functions on it, which is a bit of an overstatement, as we will get to as we proceed through this. The first thing is that homomorphic encryption isn't new. This is, it's a lovely idea, but of course, you can use it. We've been using it for decades. And of course, all of you will be completely familiar with the fact that I am, of course, talking about password hashing. When we store passwords, we don't store the password itself, we store a hash, and we store a one-way hash. This is intended that you're not able to use the hash to recover the password. You can't decrypt the password on password hashing, and you can even logically, mathematically prove that because, of course, we hash to a fixed size when we store the passwords, and hashes can compress any size of message into a fixed size hash digest. So therefore, you cannot know that you are in fact recovering the password. Even if you go through the dictionary attacks and that sort of thing, you may be able to find a password that works, but you can't find the original password. So we have been using that. This is something we keep the encrypted data, and we still get to use it. So that's one. Now, another example. This is kind of a bad example of homomorphic encryption, but electronic codebook. For those of you who have studied encryption, you know that electronic codebook mode of a block cipher is the weakest form of any cipher. Because if you encrypt the same data, you get the same ciphertext. So the same plain text encrypted in electronic codebook is going to produce the same ciphertext. And of course, this leads to situations where, for example, in the graphics, if it's a fairly simple graphic and it's encrypted in electronic codebook mode, you can actually see what the original graphic was, or at least, puzzle it out pretty accurately as to what the original image was. Again, if it's a simple image. So we can use electronic codebook in a block cipher if we want to do an exact search, and if we are searching for something where the block size is the same size as the data we're looking for. So we can do a search, we can do a comparison, we can do an exact match if we're using that. Now, that's not something we normally do, but it is a function that we can perform. We can do sorting to a certain extent. For example, a good old Caesar cipher. You can use the Caesar cipher or ROT13 and do a sort, and you will basically get at least roughly a rough approximation of the sort that you would get otherwise. And that, I mean, the Caesar cipher is a mod function, a very simple mod function, but it is a mod function. So any ciphers that use mod functions, we should have the ability to do a limited amount of sorting on that. As I said, these are fairly bad examples. Another one, of course, COVID-19. Happy COVID pandemic anniversary, by the way, which was a couple of weeks ago. But if we are doing contact tracing with the fairly widely used DP3T protocol, most of the contact tracing apps that actually have come into implementation, and I know that there's a lot of question as to how useful these things are, but they use pure random data as a beacon. And that does not contain any personally identifiable information. Now, as soon as you get into implementation of that, you start to see problems, because even if we record the beacon along with the date and time or the location, we start to give away personally identifiable information, or at least potentially. But if the app, the contact app, is just collecting the beacon itself, then no, we're not giving away any personally identifiable information. We're not invading privacy and that sort of thing. And that's just using random data. So, I mean, we can't decrypt that for any purpose. But again, these aren't particularly good examples. They are examples of the idea of homomorphic encryption, but what we want is something a bit more useful. And so let's get into voting. Now, of course, voting, lots of stuff. I worked as a poll clerk and even deputy returning officer in some of the federal elections here in Canada. I know that once you have the ballot, when you're counting the votes, basically all we have is confidentiality, and the process of the election is where we get into identification, authentication, authorization, non-repudiation, and and all those verifications that we have to. That's part of the process. But once we have the actual ballot and we're actually counting the votes, we only have the confidentiality and the ability to count the votes. So if you want to look this up, I mean, people have looked at this for years, and we have voting machines, we have proposals for online voting, most of which are almost universally terrible ideas. And if you go to the Risks Forum Digest and search on voting, you will find literally hundreds of articles pointing out the weaknesses and flaws and vulnerabilities in so many proposed voting systems. But Revest, and yes, that is the Revest, that's the RSA, came up with 3 ballot voting. And this is a very, very interesting system. It does give you the confidentiality and anonymity. It gives you also non-repudiation of voting. It allows the voter to verify that their vote has been counted. The ballots are counted without ever being decrypted. So this is an example of homomorphic encryption. It's a really interesting one, because when you go into the details, you can implement this on paper or digitally. And so finally, in terms of voting machines, in terms of online voting, we do finally have a system that probably gives us at least the beginnings of a good possibility of using it. And it's a really, really interesting example. So this is a much better example of homomorphic encryption. By the way, Microsoft recently announced this system product, whatever, called Election Guard. And from the information that they have given out on it, it does seem to be based on Revest's 3 ballot voting system. So something to watch out for there. Now, that's one function, but there are other functions we want to do. And so when you look at homomorphic encryption and what you want to do with the data without decrypting it, you have to build a function and algorithm based on what it is that you want to do. For example, addition and multiplication, fairly simple arithmetic functions, and of course, addition at least is going to be fairly similar to the ballot counting and that sort of thing. Addition and multiplication are associative and commutative. That's what the functions here indicate. So if we can find any function that is both associative and commutative, it might be the basis for a solution for an algorithm that will give us the ability to do addition and multiplication with undecrypted data. We can work on the encrypted data and get proper results using this kind of a function. And this is how you find an algorithm for any particular function, for anything that you want to do with encrypted data. You find an algorithm that supports the basic underlying principles of the function you want to perform. There are a number of examples here, and you can go to these sites and play around with it. IBM has been working on this in terms of addition and multiplication. Microsoft, in addition to their election guard, is probably a separate project, but they are working on addition and multiplication, and the SEAL algorithm is there. Google is looking at some stuff that's slightly different. They are looking at comparison. Again, we looked at search and exact match and limited addition under the name of private join and compute. Interesting project there. If you want to look at other examples, homomorphicencryption.org, the introduction section of that site lists a number of projects that are going on. And so you can go there. You can find the write-ups, you can find the actual code, and play around with it yourself to see how this works and how well. And is everybody still awake? So this is just a little bit of a break. Any questions so far? Don't seem to have had any on the chat, and hopefully Aaron will let me know if anybody.
No, none so far yet, Rob. I think most people are waiting till the end.
Okay.
I have a question, but I'll keep it till the end.
Good. Ask it now.
So one of the things I was going to ask was, do you see a time when, say, things like Reves 3 will be used for digital voting systems, and that will become the standard in the future? A lot of places are still on paper. They kind of stick to what they know. So.
Yeah, as I say, the 3 voting system can be used on paper. There is an implementation that you can use it for a paper ballot. So it would be a more secure paper ballot than is the existing case. When you use the 3 ballot voting system, if you're doing it with a paper implementation, you get literally 3 ballots. And you vote, but you only drop one of the 3 ballots into the ballot box. You get to keep 2. And the fact that you are keeping these 2 ballots allows you to verify at a later date, if you want, whether or not your vote actually has been counted. So like I say, the current system, you drop your vote in the ballot box, you trust in the system, the process is there to ensure that your ballot does get counted, but you don't know that. You can't verify that. With the paper implementation of the 3 ballot voting system, you at a later date can prove that your vote was or was not counted. So even with a paper-based system, yes, I can see the 3 ballot voting system being used as the basis of improvements to our existing voting systems, and certainly as the only thing that I've been able to see in terms of a relatively safe online or digital voting system. So, and somebody's asked about quantum homomorphic. I'll come back to that, because if I get into that now, I'm going to waste an awful lot of time. But yes, I will talk about quantum encryption later on. Anyways, the thing is that homomorphic encryption, while it's a lovely idea, it's not perfect. It isn't the holy grail that was mentioned in the media headline. First of all, it's not a thing. There's all kinds of functions and implementation, just like blockchain. I want to get myself a t-shirt that says blockchain is not the answer. I don't care what the question is. Blockchain is not the answer, because blockchain is not a thing. It's a bunch of different functions, collection of functions and implementations that are all over everywhere. Yes, Daniel, I will answer that question. Anyways, it's not universal. Homomorphic encryption, when you do it, you have to choose your function in advance. The function that you want to perform determines how you encrypt the data. And so it isn't just a thing where you perform, encrypt it with homomorphic encryption, and then you can do anything you want with it at a later date. You have to choose what you want to do with it first. Now, yes, we're going to talk a little bit about cryptography here. Do not fret. The mathematics, I'm not going to get into the mathematics here, but we all know about symmetric versus asymmetric encryption. Symmetric encryption, you use the same key, you use a single key, you have to share the key, and that's the problem. The symmetric encryption is strong. We know how strong it is. We know how long it's going to take, how long we can ensure that the data is protected with symmetric encryption. But we've got to manage the key, and if you can't manage the key, we have a real problem. And there's all kinds of systems, including, yes, Daniel, quantum encryption, which is not encryption. Actually, it is key exchange, quantum key exchange, and that's all to support symmetric encryption. Now, asymmetric encryption, we don't have any problem with the key, because one key is private and you never share that key. You never tell anybody what your private key is, whereas the other key is public, and you can put it in phone books, you can put it on bulletin boards, billboards, you can do anything you want with it. It's public. Anybody can know your public key. And so the key management part of that is done away with it. And, no problem with key management. But asymmetric encryption is a lot weaker than symmetric encryption, and it takes a lot longer. You need a lot more computer power. So we've got this, dichotomy between symmetric and asymmetric encryption, between the strength and the key management. And so what we do with that is we have a hybrid system. We use the asymmetric part of encryption for key management only. We encrypt the key because it's very small, and we can security pass the key. We don't have to worry about the key management. And having passed that session key, we can then use symmetric encryption to do all our bulk data encryption. And that's the way we do pretty much everything with cryptography these days. You cannot do that with homomorphic encryption. You have to work directly with the encrypted data. And so we can't have a hybrid system. We have no way of saying that we can use, symmetric encryption for this, bulk encryption and decryption of the data, and the homomorphic encryption is only for key management or something like that. It doesn't work that way. So this is going to require lots and lots of compute cycles. It is going to take an awful lot to encrypt the data, and to we're not decrypting, but to process the encrypted data and get a result. It's going to take more work. So that having been the case, we then go on to look at the fact that we have limited algorithms. Not everything we may want to do with homomorphic encryption, with the encrypted data, do we have an algorithm for at the moment. As I say, there's a number of projects looking into different types of functions, and certainly there is going to be ongoing work in this field, but we don't have all the functions that we may want. If you want to combine functions, the algorithms are going to be even more limited. You're going to have to find an algorithm that suits all the functions that you want to combine. And that's going to be more difficult to build the algorithm, and definitely more difficult in terms of the processing that you want to do. So that's going to be a weakness. We can't do everything we want with it. Remember the bad example that I gave you earlier. The Caesar cipher, that's a very weak encryption system because it's got a very limited address space. You can break a Caesar cipher with brute force anytime you want. And again, the block mode, the electronic code book mode of block ciphers, is the weakest mode for block ciphers. So that is going to limit what we can do. And as we use different homomorphic encryption systems, you have to pay attention to these things and realize that there is going to be inbuilt weaknesses to this, in the same way that asymmetric systems and algorithms are weaker than symmetric algorithms. Homomorphic algorithms are going to be similarly weak because they limit the ways you can encrypt the data that you're dealing with. So, as I said, I taught a CISSP review seminar over there some years back. So this is a sample question. Which of the following is not an effective deterrent against a database inference attack? Partitioning, small query sets, noise and perturbation, and cell suppression. And this is one that always throws people because the actual correct answer in there is noise and perturbation. And you say that to people and they say, what are you talking about? Nobody wants to put noise and perturbation into their results, but you do sometimes if you want to keep data private. And I talk about that in a different presentation on differential privacy. But the thing is that we may want to do different things with our data. And homomorphic encryption is going to definitely limit us in terms of what we can and cannot do in these systems. Now, the accuracy of the data and the accuracy of the results is another limitation here, another weakness. The people who have worked on homomorphic encryption, and again, you can go out and look at the research there, but a writer named Gentry has proposed something that he refers to as fully homomorphic encryption, because he is looking at what you can do in terms of homomorphic encryption and still get completely accurate results from the functions that you perform on it. So that's an interesting examination, and again, a limitation of what you can do with homomorphic encryption. Microsoft is going to be is promising us that they are going to be doing homomorphic encryption, guarding your passwords, the passwords that you have in Microsoft Edge. Well, first of all, everybody has been storing passwords in hashed form, and as I said before, that's basically a form of homomorphic encryption. So, this is not something new. And besides what Microsoft is promising to do in Edge, Microsoft Chrome has been doing that for years in any case. So, this is something that you are going to see with a lot of these new technologies, with homomorphic encryption, with differential privacy, with quantum cryptography and that sort of thing. You have to figure out what the people are actually doing with it. Vendors are going to be promising you things, using the latest buzzwords. But you do have to know what it is that they're talking about to determine whether what they're promising you is actually, homomorphic encryption or quantum cryptography or whatever it is, and whether or not it actually is an improvement for you, a benefit for you. So, that's basically the whole point of what I've, this presentation. Now, before I ask Saren for some more questions, quantum homomorphic, Ed.
You have 15 minutes here, Rob. If that's the only question, so you can use the time as much as you like.
Okay, well, we'll see if anybody comes up with any other questions. But yes, quantum cryptography. I love this because I have yet another presentation on security implications for quantum computing. And there is, in fact, a difference between quantum computing and quantum cryptography. And there is, in fact, a difference between quantum cryptography and cryptography. Quantum cryptography is not cryptography. Quantum cryptography is simply another way of key exchange. It's a very expensive way of key exchange. Originally, you had to have dedicated single mode fiber optic cable to do key exchange with quantum cryptography. And if you've got dedicated single mode fiber optic cable, why do you need cryptography? I mean, you've got, not completely untappable. I've had this argument with guys from the NSA, but you have the most untappable system that there is. And so, that's one part of it. But as I say, quantum cryptography is just key exchange. It's not a new means of cryptography. Now, where cryptography comes in is the Shor and some of the other algorithms that are proposed for quantum computers. And quantum computers, the theory is that quantum computers will be able to break encryption, but you have to have an algorithm to break the encryption. And the Shor algorithm, for example, to use one, is proposed as an attack on RSA, but it's only an attack on RSA. It can be used on other crypto algorithms that use mod functions in particular, but it's not exactly theoretical. It does work, but only if we have a quantum computer. And at the moment, the real quantum computers are limited to, qubits in the double digits. In order to break an RSA key of 4,000 bits, which is not unreasonable, you are going to have a quantum computer, full quantum computer, with at least 8,000 qubits. So, we've got double digits right now. We've got to go to, at least 8,000 qubits. There's a few orders of magnitude in there before we have to worry about people breaking RSA keys. Now, there is a quantum computing system that's a little bit larger. That is the D-Wave system, and I know about that because that's over in Burnaby. It's not 20 miles from where I'm sitting here, but that is not that is best described as probably a quantum coprocessor. That's not a fully functioning quantum computer. So that is, there's limitations there. Now, I assume that when you say quantum homomorphic, you're talking there Okay, you're giving me a URL. I'll go and have a look at that, and maybe we can talk about that if you fire me your email address. Anyways, you can contact me via email. Okay, a few more questions have come in here. Yeah, quite a few. Is this something that could replace the current PKI? Basically, no. I mean, it's a different system. If you don't need to decrypt the function, of course, you don't need PKI because you don't need asymmetric encryption. You don't need the key exchange and that sort of thing. But it's only going to be useful in fairly limited situations. Is there any solid homomorphic encryption solution available that is reliable and can be deployed on an industrial scale, such as in public cloud? Yes. Again, the ones that I sent you, and I fired all the links from the presentation here into the chat. So if you go into the chat and pick that up, you'll be able to see those things. Those systems are available. I mean, you can even get the source code. They are reliable. They can be deployed on an industrial scale, but only for those specific functions. Again, you're limited to those the functions that those projects have looked at. And you mentioned that homomorphic encryption requires lots more CPU cycles. What rough order of magnitude would you mean? That I have not done the math in terms of how much more. I'm just going to say, number one, it's going to be, as compute intensive as asymmetric encryption or more. And we know that processing of in asymmetric rather than symmetric encryption is 100 to 1,000 times more intense, and we cannot, as I say, use the same type of hybrid combinations that we could with asymmetric and symmetric encryption, as I mentioned there. What's the most feasible likely use case for homomorphic encryption based on the current research? Well, based on the current research, I'd say the voting system. There are the comparisons, matching. As I say, we've been using that for password protection for years. So, we are using it. There are a bunch of things that we can use it for. But there are also a number of things that we would like to do while still protecting and keeping data encrypted. And we simply haven't got the algorithms yet to do that. So that seems to cover what's come in so far. Any further discussions?
Nothing yet on the chat, Rob. You've made my job very easy as MC. You've done all the questioning for me, which is fantastic. I could just sit back and have a coffee. No, very, very interesting talk, Rob. Thank you very much. We might just give folks another minute or two just to see if they have any additional questions, and then we can let you and Ed duke it out on a separate channel to talk about quantum encryption.
Yeah.
So nothing else has come in, Rob. So once again, thanks for your time today. A very interesting talk.
You're quite welcome. And I guess people have 4 minutes to run to the bathroom before Chet comes on deck. And you'll want to listen to Chet. Yeah,
absolutely. Thanks again, Rob. And hopefully see you.
Quite welcome.
Dublin sometime again soon.